Hello, this is Victoria Clark, and for my final assignment for examining multimodality in literacy, I actually decided with Professor Karchmer-Klein to focus on adapting a lesson plan instead of transforming a lesson plan. I specialize in digital accessibility, so that is making documents, websites, and other media accessible to people with disabilities. So I'm going to kind of gloss over some aspects of the project because we should already know them, but the lesson plan I decided to focus on was the home page for EDUC 762 and also the module, the first module for EDUC 762. Now, because I am using Canvas ePortfolio, unfortunately I do not have access to make the modules. So it all is in one page. This actually ended up working out in my favor. The learning goal for Module 1 was to understand the theory behind multimodality and also do some initial application through VoiceThread. The assessment is the discussion posts. One thing I'd like to comment on is, although obviously a course about multimodality will have multimodality, as far as why the lesson plan benefits from multimodality, I'd like to talk about how certain people with disabilities, especially print disabilities and learning disabilities, can really benefit from multimodality because they learn in a different manner, and when you have more than one mode to both initially teach and also reinforce the learning, that's really going to help. I used the Quality Matters rubric and focused on the accessibility portion while also looking at everything else on the Quality Matters rubric. And I also drew heavily from best practices in using technology to support writing, the large chunk of reading that we did this past week. As I mentioned before, I focused on not transforming, but adapting the lesson plan to make it more accessible. So I will go to this was the before for EDUC 762 home. I wasn't able to transfer Professor Karchmer-Klein's video, but everything else is here just as before. Now, what I did to alter this, or adapt this, and I'm sorry, but the YouTubes right now aren't being embedded, but you can link out to YouTube and still see them. I split up the introduction video into just an introduction, and then further down here I actually walk the students through the course through screen sharing versus face-to-face. So I felt that that was very useful. Something else important that I did is I utilized headings, which are a major point for accessibility. This here is the heading 2, and I actually split up this paragraph from right behind course description. I also split up these 3, so it's course overview, which is a heading 3, and course description, which is also a heading 3. People who use screen readers can navigate the pages by having the headings spoken to them. So let's say someone already read through the entire page and they knew exactly where they wanted to go. They knew they wanted to go to prerequisites. Well, they could do that quite easily from here. Same thing with technical troubleshooting. I also changed this down here from just plain text ones to actually be an ordered list. That's also very useful for a variety of different disabilities, especially those that use assistive technologies. I don't want to get too much into changing wording, but I actually completely changed the wording down here, and I'd like to explain why. In the initial example, it says, if your request is urgent or if you experience problems using the form, call the IT Support Center at 302-831-60000, Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Now, someone may have stopped their screen reading as soon as they got to call the IT support center at this number. They really needed to know ahead of time that Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., they really needed to know that before the number. So what I did is I reworded it to say, if you experience problems, the IT support center, first of all, I linked to there, can be reached Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. at the phone number. So that way they find out all the pertinent information before they actually get to the point where they might say, okay, I have the information I need, this is the number I need to call. So that's just one thing I wanted to point out. This was the only place I did that, but I think this was the only place that I really felt needed it as well. Now, as I mentioned before, unfortunately, I don't have the capacity to make modules, so it is all on one page. But this is why I actually think it can be useful. If you do, for some reason, have a longer page, you can use anchor links to help people jump throughout the text. And for people who can see and aren't using screen readers, I also made the heading 2s for each activity a different color, which is helpful if you're just trying to scroll down and jump to a particular spot. I don't encourage long pages for accessibility, but if you do, it's good to have links, kind of like a table of contents at the top. And after each section, I have a back to top. And every place does that a little bit differently. On Canvas, you put in the URL for the page, and at the end you put # content, and that will work for any page. Alrighty, so let's start with Activity 1, Introductions. The number one thing I did for all of these activities was just add tons and tons of hyperlinks. Because originally it just said begin by reading the course description and requirements found on the home and syllabus pages. Well, that's fine, but if they weren't hyperlinked initially, and I don't believe they were, let me just check, because some of them were. Yes, they were not hyperlinked initially. But someone who's using a screen reader or someone who has mobility impairments, they would have to tab through the page all over again to get to home or syllabus, and that could cause a lot of problems and sometimes even pain for some people with disabilities. I did the same thing for assignments page. Here it had a link, just the link itself, http voicethread.com. They encourage you to actually put what the link is, and then the hyperlink they usually discourage, for accessibility reasons, just having a URL out there without any signifier, so I did change that. And I also added that if at any point there are issues accessing VoiceThread, to use VoiceThread Universal, which is an accessible version of VoiceThread. I just added hyperlinks throughout here in case people found it difficult to navigate VoiceThread or VoiceThread Universal. And I created a more specific hyperlink for the directions to go through VoiceThread. This is always something that a lot of people disagree with. They don't want an entire sentence to have a hyperlink, but many people have to tab from hyperlink to hyperlink to try and find out their information, so they need to know the full information. And this was the best way I could think to say it concisely. Follow my directions to get started with VoiceThread. So I just hyperlinked the entire sentence. Now, Activity 2 and Activity 4 I treated quite similarly. In both cases, I decided to put the questions not just found through the Word document, but also on the actual web page. For some people, again, usually people with screen readers or also people with mobility impairments, it's hard to toggle back and forth between different applications. I also added a link along with the questions to the BBC website. For activity 3, this was actually interesting because one thing I would like to point out, especially for all teachers and educators out there, is that Glogster is not accessible. If you deal with any kind of disability, mostly, again, mobility or screen readers, but also people who may not have, it's not just accessibility, it's also like low economic problems. You need to have the top of the line computer, completely updated browsers, completely updated Flash, completely updated, all these, you have to have everything updated to the nth degree for Glogster to work. So not only is this not accessible, but it's not digitally inclusive. And by digitally inclusive, I mean it alienates people who either don't have access to state-of-the-art computers, and by state-of-the-art I mean even just in the past 5 years. Their computers are maybe even 20 years old. So what I've done is I still include the Glogster for the frequency count, but then I have a note saying that Glogster is not an accessible platform. If you use an assistive technology and cannot access Glogster, you may conduct the frequency count on the interactive timeline for the Ford Foundation. I tried long and hard to find an interesting application like Glogster that was accessible, and I was at a loss. So I guess that is something that you should take note of as an educator. A lot of these Web 2.0 tools don't really think about the full spectrum of accessibility when they're being created. Just like with the questions for the videos, I have the table here as well. Obviously you can't, type into it. It's not like a form that you can type into, but for some people it might just be easier for them to do the frequency count in their head than try and jump back and forth between applications. Activity 4 just mirrors activity 2. And discussion post 1 doesn't really have anything extra. I just link to the syllabus just to keep it consistent. Now, as far as challenges, there are a couple of different challenges. On one hand, there really is not the technical support right now pretty much anywhere, unless you have a specialist, for people to understand and apply accessibility. But another challenge is the individual teachers. The biggest problem is people not knowing. People don't know what is and isn't accessible. And those that do sometimes don't care. They just want to deal with it when it comes up. So they may get a student who is deaf, and they are ill-prepared to create transcripts for their videos, captions for their videos, and in many cases, if you didn't use an appropriate program from the beginning, you have to completely redo many components of your course to make it accessible to that student. And through ADA, you're required. Alright, I hope you enjoyed this, and please feel free to contact me via email or Canvas if you have any questions or concerns about accessibility.